My name is Bonnie Isaac. I'm the collection manager here in the section of botany. In the herbarium, we have about 530,000 plant specimens from all over the world. About a third of our specimens are from Pennsylvania. A third of our specimens are from the rest of North America, and the other third is from the rest of the country. So plants are very important in our daily lives. Most people don't realize how important plants are. So it's, if we look at our food sources, our clothing sources, our home construction material, and even the air we breathe all comes from plants, so it's really important that we study the plants. So let's take a look at some of the hidden treasures we have here in the collection. This specimen is Myosotis macrosperma, also called the large-seeded forget-me-not. This species was unknown from Pennsylvania until it was collected in 1995. It's a native plant that grows further south, but we were doing some field work down in Greene County. And while we were in Greene County just doing some general collecting because it was a very under-collected portion of the state, we happened upon this species. And it was the first time it was collected in Pennsylvania, so we're not sure if it was just overlooked in Pennsylvania for years, or if it happened to be moving up into Pennsylvania due to weather being warmer or whatever. After we brought this specimen into the herbarium and identified it, we went to our collections and realized that we had two older species or specimens of this in the collection that just had never been identified because it wasn't known from Pennsylvania, so people weren't looking for it. So this one was collected in 1995. The oldest one we have was collected in 1990, so still not that terribly long ago. Coincidentally, when we found this in 1995, in May of 1995, another botanist found it over in Lancaster County in May of 1995 as well, 2 days after we collected this one. So it's new for the state, and we considered listing it as rare or endangered, but when we started looking around, there's just too much of it out there. So we decided not to list it, but it's a fairly new thing. So let's look at another one here. So this plant is Petasites japonicus. It's called the Japanese butterbur. So the Japanese butterbur is native to China, Korea, and Japan. So this one was, oh, I have it upside down. Sorry about that. This one was collected up near Titusville along Oil Creek. And this just happened, I was on a family outing with my family. We were kayaking. And so while my husband and his brothers were shuttling the kayaks, I stayed with, at the ends to look around. And I found these huge leaves out in the woods in a wetland that I didn't recognize as being from Pennsylvania. And so we went back the following spring to figure out what it was when it was blooming. And we found this Japanese plant growing out there. So I brought it back to the herbarium to try to figure out what it was, and when I identified it using the books that it was Japanese butterbur, then I went to the collection to compare it with specimens that we may have from Japan to confirm its identification. In the process of doing that, I found this specimen in our collection, which happens to be the same species, also from Titusville, but it was misidentified. So this plant has been growing up near Titusville from at least 1968. So, but it was just went unnoticed. It was new to the state in 2010, but it actually has been here from at least 1968. So this was by a woman who was native or who lived up in Titusville, and my guess is that she probably brought it to the museum and said, "This is growing around my house, and I don't know what it is. Can you help me identify it?" They got the genus right, the species wrong, but, they were close. It's definitely one of the better butterburs. So I'm tripping over my tongue here, huh? So, all right, let's look at another treasure we have here. This one's cool. This is a Platanthera leucophea, which is the prairie white-fringed orchid. This is a federally threatened species. It only grows in a few places, and it's federally threatened because it has limited range, and the habitat that it grows in is very specialized. This was collected in 1881 at Brown's Cranberry Marsh in Crawford County, and this is the only known specimen of this species that was ever collected in Pennsylvania. So I don't know the collector's name, but we just have his initials, CWC. And unfortunately, this has not been refound in Pennsylvania. This was collected in 1881. The area that this was believed to be from was mined for peat and marl in the 1890s. Marl is something that's used for fertilizer, and so we believe the habitat where this grew was probably destroyed. But if CWC, whoever that was, hadn't collected this and made a nice specimen for us here in the herbarium, we would never have known it ever occurred in Pennsylvania. So we're still out there looking for it. I last year took a trip to Ohio, to northwestern Ohio, to see this plant growing in the wild so that I could get a feel for the habitat so that we have an idea where to go look for it in Pennsylvania. So there's that one. And then, this is one of the oldest specimens we have here in the herbarium. This specimen was collected by Michel Adanson, a French botanist who lived in the 18th century. He was a contemporary of Linnaeus. And Adanson, at the same time Linnaeus was working on a classification system for plants, Adanson was working on his own system. Linnaeus' system won out, but Adanson was still out there. Linnaeus published his Species Plantarum, the beginning of plant taxonomy, in 1753. This specimen was collected in the Jardin du Luxembourg in 1754. This specimen is over 200 years old, and it's phenomenal. We acquired this specimen. It was a gift to us from the Hunt Institute of Botanical Documentation, which is next door at Carnegie Mellon University, in 1993. They acquired the specimen back in 1961. Roy Hunt of Alcoa fame purchased the Adanson collection from Adanson's family. It had been in his family for over 150 years, but Roy Hunt purchased all of Adanson's collections, his library and his manuscripts and his specimens. And so they acquired them in 1961, and then in 1993 they decided that because we have a herbarium and could better take care of the specimens, they gifted us the specimens. So we've got, and this is calendula, which is a fairly common plant, cultivated plant. Its common name is English marigold, but it's not one of our marigolds, what we call a marigold. So there's that. So here's another interesting specimen. This specimen is Viola appalachiensis. It's called the Appalachian violet. So this was just discovered as a new species in the 50s by Leroy Henry, who was a curator here at the museum from 1937 till 1973. So this is from Kimberly Run in Somerset County. So this was a new species described new to science by Leroy Henry in the 1950s. Dr. Henry originally called it Viola alleghaniensis. Then it was discovered that there was already a Viola alleghaniensis, so that's considered a preoccupied name. So he had to give it a new name, so then he called it Viola appalachiensis. And then when in order to describe a species new to science, you have to publish it in a publication and give it, designate what's considered a holotype, which is the actual specimen that was used by the scientist describing a new species. So in his publication, Dr. Henry inadvertently designated 3 specimens as types, which that's a no-no. So years later, when we discovered that he accidentally considered called 3 specimens the type, I was then able to go in and designate what's called a lectotype. A lectotype is when you choose one of the 3 specimens that was called a type as the actual one to be the bearer of the name. And so this is the specimen that I chose as the bearer of the name. This is our lectotype of Viola appalachiensis. So Steve Grund from the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy and I published this. And so this is a threatened plant in Pennsylvania, not threatened because it's really rare in Pennsylvania, because it has a very limited range. It's known from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, and maybe North Carolina, but it's extremely limited in where it grows in the state. And unlike most rare plants, this one actually likes to grow where there's human disturbance. So that's kind of an issue with, you know, it's growing in people's yards and on pipelines, but we protect it. So how do you protect someone's yard? It's a debate we're going through. But so there's that one. So here's another treasure from our collection. This specimen has a very interesting story. This specimen was collected by Sergeant David Ralston of the Greely Expedition to Lady Franklin Bay. The Greely Expedition was a scientific expedition that went up north to document parts of the world that were unmapped. So they were doing scientific expeditions. They were looking for weather and what else grew there. Sergeant Ralston was a surveyor, but while he was up there doing his surveying, he collected plants. The Greely Expedition got stranded. There were 2 shipments of supplies that didn't reach them, and so there were 25 men who went out on the Greely Expedition, and most of them starved or died of hypothermia. One of them was actually shot. Lieutenant Greely ordered him to be executed. I don't know why, but so one of them was shot. But 6 men survived when they were rescued in 1884. The Greely Expedition was 1881 to 1884. 6 of them survived. One of those men died on the trip home. But the really interesting part of the Greely Expedition is after they brought the bodies of the dead men back, they realized that the muscles had been filleted off the bones, and so they believed the survivors survived by cannibalism. So we have 45 specimens from this expedition, and the specimens came back, but the men didn't. So it's an interesting thing there. So let's see, here's another specimen we have here. This is Praenanthes crepidinea, the nodding rattlesnake weed. This was believed to be an endangered species in Pennsylvania. We knew of one extant or site that still existed in the 1990s. It's a plant that's monocarpic. That means it grows for several years and blooms once and then dies. And so we knew of the one site in Lawrence County at Wolf Creek Narrows. And then I started doing some research on this plant because I'm very interested in the rare and endangered plants that grow in Pennsylvania. And so I started looking into this plant because it grows fairly close to where I live. The one site that, I live in Lawrence County, the one site that was known was Lawrence County, so I'm like, let me look into this. So what I discovered was that if you go out in the spring, there's lots of little individuals, and they grow for several years, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger until finally they get enough energy in their root system to bolt and bloom. And once they bolt and bloom and set fruit, then they die. So, but like maybe 1 out of every 10,000 plants will bloom each year. So if you go out looking for it at bloom time, which is what most botanists do, go looking for a plant during bloom time, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. But if you go out in the spring, the forest floor is actually carpeted with these little plants. Some places where you can't not step on them. So once I discovered that, and learned some more parts of the life history of this plant, we started looking around for it. And when you go in the spring and find the young individuals, then you know where to go look in the fall to find the bloomers. So we had one known site in the early 1990s, and by 1999 we had it in like 20 different counties, and pretty much decided we don't need to protect it. There's enough of it out there. And it was also endangered in several other states. This plant grows from Pennsylvania out to Missouri, Arkansas, out in that neck of the woods. So all the states in between were tracking it as endangered. And since many states have delisted it due to my research on it being not as rare as we thought it was. All right, we've got some questions coming in. So let's see. This is Upton's 4th grade class in Ohio. What is my favorite plant? Well, that's kind of like asking a mother which is her favorite child. I can answer that question a lot easier because I only have one child. But my favorite plant, oh man, that's a tough one. Praenanthes crepidinea has to rank right up there because I got a master's degree off of that one. So, Let's see, do I have any other favorite plants? I really like Trillium undulatum, which is the painted trillium. And the reason I really like that plant is because when I was a kid, I would go camping with my dad up in Clarion County near Cook Forest. And that one grows in the woods near where we would camp. So that was, and it's a pretty spectacular plant. All right, let's see. Miss Dean's class, kindergarten class, what is a herbarium? A herbarium is actually a collection of plant specimens. So we have 530,000 specimens like the ones I've been showing, and when you put those all together and stick them in cabinets, you have a herbarium. So let's see, Malcolm from 3rd grade. How many different species have I collected? Oh, wow. Well, I've collected about 18,000 specimens from all over North America. So among those, I've probably collected a couple thousand different species, but I don't know the exact number. So that would be an interesting thing. I'll have to try to figure that out. Let's see, Troy in kindergarten. What is the biggest plant I've ever found? Well, that's a loaded question, because I've gone out and seen the redwoods and the giant sequoias, and they're pretty big, but did I find them? I don't know. I knew where they were. I knew where to go look. Clayton, age 10. How many new plants have you found? If we're talking new to Pennsylvania, unknown for Pennsylvania, then I've got maybe about 10 of them. But if we're talking new to science, I have not found any species that are new to science. All right, let's see. Here's another question. We've got some more. All right, 3rd grade, Verner Elementary in Verona. How long have plants been around? Does that say, yeah, that says around. Okay, sorry. Plants have been around for a long, long time. They were around before the dinosaurs. That's what some of the dinosaurs were eating. I don't know an exact number for how long plants have been around, but a long, long, long time. Michael, age 9. How long have you been working here? I've been working here at the museum since August of 1989, so that's 27 and a half years. So that one I do know an exact number. So, all right. Danny, age 9. How old is your oldest plant? Well, we have some plants that are perennial, so they've probably lived for a couple hundred years. But if you're talking about the oldest plant specimen here in the herbarium, that one I showed from 1754 is probably it. Grant, age 9, were you interested in plants as a child? Yes, I was. I really liked to go outside with my dad. My dad and I would go on nature hikes all the time. And so whenever we would go on a hike, we would go off into the woods, and my dad would tell me what things were on the way out into the woods, and on the way home I had to tell him what they were. So it really got me interested in identifying plants and how to tell plants apart. And plants don't run away. You know, I like animals too, but they're a little harder to study because when you try to sneak up on them, they run. The plants usually stay there, so that's one of the reasons I really liked plants. Sean, age 8, what's the rarest plant in the collection? The rarest plant in the collection is probably, we have one specimen of Micranthemum micranthomoides, which is an extinct species. It used to grow over near Philadelphia, but it hasn't been seen for over 100 years. So that's probably got to be about our rarest plant that we have. But if we're talking our rarest plant that's still alive, we've got several specimens of endangered species, and some of the federally endangered ones would probably be those, so like the Platanthera. So are we, no more questions? We're good? All right. Well, tune in next time to see our next science series live streaming. Thanks. Have a good day.